So I am Shane Caffrey. I work for Leash Network Solutions. I am going to be the moderator of this panel. So I will be directing and asking questions. I'm going to set the stage and then I'm going to introduce our panelists. So cyber attacks like ransomware are becoming more prolific and costly for businesses. At the same time, technology continues to become more essential for business operations. IT departments everywhere are expected to keep companies safe and systems up and running. We've invited several IT leaders for this roundtable discussion on cybersecurity in 2022 to share ideas on how they're meeting the challenge. So I'd like to introduce the panelists one by one. So we have Stel Valavanis, CEO and founder of Onshore Security. And if you'd like to take just a minute to sort of give your background and the background of what your company does, that'd be appreciated.
Sure. Yeah, Onshore Security is a pivot from a networking business around 2015. We developed a SIM and sensor platform where we built our MDR NDR service out of. We call that Panoptic Cyber Defense. So today we mainly service mid-market clients with Panoptic, but we also service a greater market with managed security solutions like managed firewall and EDR, and then cybersecurity consulting.
Thank you. We're also joined by James McQuiggan. He's a security awareness consultant for KnowBe4.
Thanks very much, Shane. Yeah, James McQuiggan, a security awareness advocate over at KnowBe4, where we do phishing assessments, security awareness training, wanting to make sure organizations are protecting against the social engineering attacks that we see, like phishing that lead to ransomware, business email compromise, and getting people to be enabled to make smarter security decisions every day. One of the other things that I love about my role is I don't really sell anything. I just promote and I talk about cybersecurity. I'm a college professor as well. So I talk about cybersecurity all day. So excited to be here with everybody to talk about one of my favorite topics.
Thanks, James. We also have Barry Manuel, CIO of MEB Management Services.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Shane. Thank you for inviting me. Definitely on the business end. MEB is a multifamily management service. Got about 600 employees in 4 different states, and we manage about 26,000 apartment units across the country. Excited to be here and hear what everybody has to say.
Thanks. We also have Zach Mudarayan, a Senior Channel Account Manager for Datto.
Thanks, Shane. I am an account manager at Datto. So Datto is a backup and disaster recovery solution, but also we do Office 365 backup and cybersecurity as well within Office 365 and other tools. I've been with Datto for 3 years now, and I help IT companies like Leash grow their security stack and improve their business just on a day-to-day level and help make sure their end clients are protected.
And last but not least, we have Eric Leash, president of Leash Network Solutions.
Hi, thank you, Shane. Nice to meet everybody. So Leash are managing and securing networks since 1997, and we love to partner with companies and clients on how we can better manage technology and secure it. So we love having these roundtables and just keep adding layers of security.
Thank you all. I'm just going to take 1 minute to double check nobody is having any connection issues. I'm hearing a large deluge of email alerts. So give me just 1 second here. Okay. No, I think we're okay. Stel, it looks like Josh is trying to join in, so he may be having some problems, but I've sent him the link, so hopefully he's able to connect. So I am going to start asking some of these questions for our panel. We have some pre-prepared questions. All of our panelists have seen these questions beforehand. I've asked them just to prepare some thoughts, not necessarily any pre-written monologues to read. What we really want here, and what you've been great about already, is sparking discussion. So the first question that I have for the panel, and I'm going to be posing these to one of you initially, and then we'll see kind of where it goes. We'll let it roll pretty organically. So first question, what is the biggest cybersecurity threat businesses are currently facing? And part two of that question, why is it the biggest threat? And Stel, I'd like to start with you.
Okay, sure, yeah. Well, first of all, let me kind of state the obvious. I'll throw ransomware out right away as a kind of a big one, just because it's the most prevalent. But let me give it a caveat, because I really rather not make it kind of the big one, because even though it is the biggest one in that it's most likely to hit you and it's a significant impact, we kind of know how to mitigate against ransomware these days. I mean, we got data on the line here, for God's sake, right? I mean, we know how to deal with the ransomware, and frankly, we should have known all along. All of us here have been screaming from the mountaintop for a long time. Good backups, good testing on those, offline, offsite backup, etc. So let me add then another one. Let me add in the fact that there are nation state actors that with serious APT persistent threats, that the impact that they would have when they're serious is far greater than ransomware. Ransomware doesn't want your business to die. Ransomware wants to come back to you 2 years later, or maybe a month later, and nail you again and take your money. Okay. Nation states want you to die or get to somebody else, bigger from you. So you are definitely in the target, because I guarantee you are. If you're even a pretty small business, there's a supply chain dotted line to very, very important big players. So I do want to highlight that over ransomware for those reasons.
Yeah. So James, I saw you raised your hand. Did you want to add to what Stel was saying?
So yeah, definitely with what we see with the ransomware attacks, but I think what I see a lot of is ransomware gets a lot of the media coverage, and because it's big, it's flashy, it hits organizations. But what some folks may not be aware of is what the silent killer is that's out there, and that's business email compromise. Last year, ransomware was well over $50 to $100 million in losses for organizations. Business email compromise was over $2.5 billion. And that's coming out of the IC3 report that the FBI released last week. So, and we talk about business email compromise because cyber criminals are getting in through through phishing, through email, or they're getting in through unpatched systems. And they get in there, and with business email compromise, they are really, really quiet because they're monitoring the email, they're monitoring the networks, they're watching what's going on. And then when an invoice comes in from an organization, they're creating a fake invoice or sending in a fake email that says, hey, we've changed our account information. That's just one example. And they end up walking away with a lot of money because organizations don't catch that it's actually been a phishing email. So ransomware is up there, business email compromise is up there, and then that's all based off of a phishing attack or unpatched systems.
I think you bring up a really good point. Ransomware is sort of the sexy hot button issue, and even in promoting this event, right? We do ransomware first because that's what drives interest. But you bring up a good point that that's not the only attack that we need to be worried about. Barry, in your experience, from the business side, what are you seeing as the top threat?
I would agree with the other two panelists for sure. For us, from my lens, from more the business side of it, it's email. Email is the most vulnerable system, and it's the most reliant on humans. I read 90% of all of the cyber attacks are human caused. In fact, IBM did one just last year that had that number up to, or percentage up to 95%. So that's the opening. And so without a shadow of a doubt for us, what I'm most concerned about these days is email.
Yeah, Eric, and you could, if you want to raise your hand, no problem, but also feel free to jump in if you have something.
Yeah, definitely ransomware is on the top of the list. And then once that gets into your environment, remote code execution vulnerabilities, it gets worse, right? You don't need admin access to compromise the system once you have some kind of inroad into a network. And even if external systems that touches the internet, we keep hearing the comments like always be patching. It's a new acronym, ABP, always be patching. So that's what IT folks are continuing doing.
Yeah, I would agree with what everyone is saying, and I'd even kind of take a step back and say the threats are always changing, right? So we can say ransomware is the top today. That could change tomorrow. That could change a year from now, right? And the attack vector for these attacks is just ever growing. So I think that just staying up to date and working with your IT professional or working with the experts in this, it's an ongoing battle that is not going to just be resolved tomorrow. So I think that the biggest threat right now is that it's always changing, and that you have to stay up to date. Email, right, as Barry said, is a great, it's the greatest attack vector right now. But something at Datto and just our direction of the company, we're seeing that there's more and more threats within SharePoint, Teams, the collaborative tools that end clients and companies are using, and this is going to expand the attack vector, but we also have to just make sure that those areas are secure as well, not just the email.
To kind of support off of that, Zach, we talk about SharePoint and all these collaborative platforms as well. And ironically, those are all supported, most likely implemented, administrated, configured by humans, and we deal with that human error. We've been talking about it for 20 years, and I know since I've been involved in security, where systems aren't up to date, people are clicking on links. These are the common attack vectors that we're seeing. The outcomes of those is going to be the ransomware, the business email compromise. We also got to look at insider threat as well. We got to deal with our own employees, whether they're with malicious intentions or negligence or accidental. Being able to look at them as well. So you're right with the attack vectors constantly changing, but it all still stems back that people are installing equipment and they're not configuring it appropriately or not patching it, as what we heard from Eric.
One of the things as an outsider to this industry, I kind of became aware of is we have this sort of distinction between the technology, what we can get the technology to do versus the human error. And we can have the best technology in the world, but people still make mistakes. So I want to jump ahead in some of the questions that I sent you and talk about the employee training element of this. So how have you been successful in training employees to be safe? And what challenges to training are you still facing? And James, I want to start with you with your background.
So I'll give it from the perspective of what we're seeing at a KnowBe4 with regards to the customers. Essentially, one of the, your security awareness training is that it's an awareness program. And, we all get in our cars and we drive every day and we go from A to B. And we have the awareness of what we need to do on the road. But a lot of the times when we're in a hurry, we'll be doing 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. It might say 70, but we're doing 80. We're in the left lane because, we got to get somewhere. We know what the speed limit is. We're taking that risk that, the cop doesn't pull us over. But having that awareness is only the first part of it. What we're looking at is wanting to try and change behaviors, try to change those tiny habits that we see with the users that are out there. Getting that education of, okay, you've got your email, you got to check your links. And as annoying or as frustrating it is for some of the folks, it's like, that slows down my productivity. Now I got to go through and do this. And anybody that's got an email address for an organization essentially has a key to the front door for that organization. And that's a lot of doors to try and manage. And the risk appetite has to be pretty big for an organization when you've got people that aren't clicking on links, or sorry, that are clicking on links. And so a lot of the time it comes down to being able to explain the why. Why are we doing this? Try to help that understanding. Granted, you still may get them that are going to be clicking on links and opening attachments because that's what their job requires. They could be in HR, they're constantly getting PDFs, but that's where we can rely on the technology to help there as well. So essentially, the awareness part is just one part of it. It has to start growing into changing behaviors and eventually getting towards a strong security culture.
And with that too, and thanks, Shane, you're part of our security awareness training program.
Cool.
We've educated hundreds and thousands of our clients on how to better protect themselves. And what's music to my ears is when I see an email or a ticket come in that says, I've received this email, please check this out. Is this a phishing email?
Right.
Those are great tickets to come in and for us to check out. And and ever since we've started our regular monthly training, security awareness training programs, we have gotten so many of those, and it's really great.
Well, you certainly want to have some sort of alerting system in there as well. So if there's a PABIT, a fish alert button that can be used where they can notify it into IT, and then IT can then go through and recognize, hey, is this a phishing email? Is this legit? And if it is, have the ability to go ahead and remove it. That's another part where the human aspect and the technology works together. So sorry, didn't mean to step on someone.
Yeah, Stowe, were you gonna add to that?
Yeah, there's definitely something that I don't know how it got lost in the shuffle at some point, but if you look back at the banking industry, and we have a nice client base in the banking business, they've been used to all kinds of risk management training, and we're talking about decades going back. How do you identify a fake ID? How do you who should verify signatures? Let me add second checks and approval mechanisms. Let me make sure customers have access to accounts, and we take off people off accounts when they're not there. How do you verify? And there's a term in the banking industry, and I think it's just kind of spread out now. KYC, know your customer, this applies squarely with the same kind of practices you would want in cybersecurity and IT. Not just things like obviously like identity management, things like James was bringing up before about there's fraud. I mean, that's not a phishing link necessarily; it's just a scam. And so we do need this sense of awareness that, again, like I said, the banking industry has already had that there. We just got to apply it to technology today, and I love that it's happening. It's just not too whatever, better late than never. But yeah, we have something to draw on. Is my point from the industry.
I completely agree with Stel there. And when I was thinking about this earlier, I was like, what can I relate this to that's relatable to everyone? Because I think that's part of to bridge the gap between like business owners or decision makers who might not be as well versed with technology, and they know it's a threat, but they're like, yeah, what do I need? What do I don't? So I relate it back to cars. I'm a car guy myself, but at one point there was no mandatory car insurance. There was no seatbelt mandatory, and there's no mandatory airbags. And then as accidents happened and bills racked up, those things became mandatory. And at first, people were a little hesitant to it, and do I really need this? But then a couple decades later, we sit here and we go, thank goodness we have car insurance, right? You hope to never use it, but it's good that it's there in case you have to. Thank goodness for seatbelts and airbags. And I relate those two to the car insurance is like having a backup. And the seatbelt and the airbags is the active cybersecurity tool protecting your network. And so that's how I've been working with some end clients to kind of bridge that gap, as you mentioned, Shane. Like, how do we get more people aware? And it's not just KnowBe4 is great. We actually use it internally at Datto. It's great on training, and it's getting people awareness through that. But even taking a step back, it's like, how do you get people interested in wanting to become more aware? right? How do you bridge that? And I think having conversations like that and making it relatable is very useful.
Yeah, Barry, I'd really like to get your perspective, and I'm going to frame it. This may not be true about MEB, but I can say with my background outside of IT, the annual IT security awareness training was kind of like, roll your eyes a little bit, like, okay, I have to do it, I get it, and maybe you take away a couple of good things, but a couple weeks later at least my coworkers who maybe are a little older, not as tech savvy, are committing the same sins. So, Barry, in the business background, when you have these stakeholders who are not IT people, how do you get that message to stick?
It's a great question. It's certainly a challenge, and we do have that annual security training requirement that everybody has to go through. And I like to think that it's gotten a little better. We try to at least make it interesting. We're big fans of KnowBe4 as well. We're users of or customers of KnowBe4. Everybody asks about what the little red hook is all about, especially folks that are coming in and new and they're in their browser and they wonder what it is. The more incidents, it's all about awareness, and you've got to get creative and you've got to bridge the gap, as was said just previously. Zach, thank you for that, and I love the automobile analogy as well. And so what we do, we're also users of. There's a scam of the week, I believe is what it's called. That's also a KnowBe4 product. And they come out and they get stale. Of course they do. And that's the whole thing it's ever changing. It's dynamic. It's moving. What was important a month ago, maybe something different this week. And so we try to leverage both internal and external. KnowBe4 is one of our biggest when it comes to the awareness piece of this. But then we'll tack on to that. Hey guys, we just wanted to let you know, you saw that scam of the week that just came out. We had 2 tickets in our help desk that had to do with this. Really watch this. And here's 3 key bullet points that are very relevant. So that's just an example of what we do, but it's constant awareness. It's not going away. We're just going to have to realize that and stay diligent and be creative.
You want your security awareness program to be not just a once a year thing, and that's kind of what we're hearing from Barry. It's a monthly thing. It's a campaign, a year-long campaign of what you're doing with different ways to promote the information out there. And one of the best ways to figure out how to do all that is work with your marketing or your PR team, because they do campaigns all the time. And if you can help promote that message through different mediums, whether it's little training videos or it's the quarterly training program, or it's a video series, a TV show series that's available that they can sit and watch as well. Little games they can play, different things just to kind of help drive home the message and just come at it different ways rather than just be the same training program every year.
Right. And James, just to jump back on a couple of things that Barry had mentioned, could you provide just a little bit of brief context on what is that red hook, and what is the scam of the week service?
So the little red hook, red or orange or depending on whatever color, but it is what we call, it's the alert system that's available from KnowBe4. It's the PAB, the fish alert button that can integrate into Google and Outlook and the different mail clients. And it's great because it adds to the communication, which is key when it comes for your security awareness program. You need your people to be able to report in if they spot or they think they've got a phishing email, whether it's part of the simulation that you're doing or whether it's a real one, but have a way to be able to communicate rather than have them have to try and forward it or attach it to a link. This way you hit the button, it goes, congratulations, you've spotted a fake one, or thank you for bringing this to our attention. And then it gets removed from their mailbox altogether. And then that way it goes into IT, and then whoever your person that oversees all that can then monitor, check that email, rip it out of everybody else's mailbox if you've got that capability as well, and help protect against it. Now, the scam of the week, that's part of our Cyber Heist newsletter, where we have updates and new information that's coming out again sometimes, folks might hear about something in the news about a particular organization getting hacked or an oil company or whatever. And so we're providing insights in that Cyber Heist newsletter with that scam of the week. Again, just to bring that awareness. If people are aware of how cyber criminals are doing these different data breaches and getting in and what they're stealing, then there's a little more sensitivity and awareness for them, and in a way to help drive the culture for that organization.
That I think that segues nicely, particularly the red hook, the technology, right? So I want to ask the panel if you or your clients have adopted any new technologies in the past year to keep your network secure, and how have they been working? Stel, I want to ask you with regard to your clients.
Sure. Two things. One, we're finally seeing people kind of move up from recurring CVE scans to something more continuous. We rebuilt our continuous vulnerability management platform, last fall. We just announced it recently, now something that fully integrates with Elastic-Stack, which is our, analysis engine. The big difference there is, it's great to get some idea of security posture quarterly, monthly, which, most of our clients were doing, still, sadly, most are doing. But moving them up to continuous scanning, with all kinds of like trending reporting, and who was the one who said before that, always be patching? I think Eric said that. It's dovetails with always be patching, because now you see your patch velocity and you can measure kind of your performance, and you can demonstrate to outside entities, what you're doing, and exactly, not just saying, hey, I'm scanning regularly, so like, hey, look at my trends, look what I'm finding over, period of time, etc. Not just for auditors, love that. Eventually, watch it. Insurance companies are going to really be pushing for this stuff. Insurance companies are going to want to do regular checks now, not just like when you're first signing up, because your security posture changes over time, or the requirements get stronger. Now, the other one I want to throw out there is, we're just starting to see machine learning have some value. Don't believe the hype. Most of the people talk about kind of machine learning. If you go look under the hood, it's, not doing much. It's kind of like being done and touted more to get some attention. And I could be more specific about where it has more value, where, others. But what's going on now is finally the tool sets are a little more available. So you're not going to see as many of these kind of proprietary things like, oh, I got ML in my thing. Well, no, you can kind of buy now some tools or data sets that are ML, directed. For instance, a really good example people ignore a lot is VirusTotal. It's an awesome thing. People report stuff to it, but VirusTotal actually does ML to find patterns. So you can interface with it with an API. So these are the kinds of things, like a low-hanging fruit, good, solid, nice bit of value that I think you'll see more of. And we're excited that we've been able to get that out to some key clients this past year. And, a lot more this year. You're going to see some new news this year along those lines.
Barry, how about you at MEB? Have you guys adopted anything in the past year, 18 months?
I was actually, I'll answer that, but I wanted to speak to what Stel was talking about, because I think he's on to something there.
Please.
With AI and machine learning. And certainly those are buzzwords, and everybody on this screen is well aware of that. But I think there's some value to being able to collect and interpret data. And if we could get to a point, we need a lot of good data for all of those tools to be able to work well. And if we could have some standards that allow us to normalize that data, then we can start to use some more of the predictive tools and what it means for us, and particularly with the insurance companies that are going to be looking at that risk and that change in posture. So I think those are the things. I haven't seen those things yet as more in the business side of this, but we use those tools in a lot of different areas around data and finances, and I think it applies here as well. I think one of the keys, the key, if I may, is going to be not only collecting the data, but normalizing the data and agreeing on a set of standards that can be used. So I'm sorry, Shane, I was so into that. What was your you asked me to answer something.
No, that's completely fine. I want to hear from the panel, what are the emerging technologies that are exciting too? But the original question was in today, right? Not looking forward to the future, but today and in the recent past, has MEB adopted any additional cybersecurity tools or any additional technology? And how has it worked? What's been good? What's been bad?
So as far
This
as
is Mike. This is Mike at O'Neill Construction. Hi. We've adopted. We use Know Before as
Hey.
well, and we like it a lot. James. We use the videos and all that stuff for training. It's really working really well for us. We've also adopted Cisco Duo for.
And Mike, I don't mean to be rude and cut you off.
Oh, go ahead.
We are going to have a Q&A section at the end
Oh.
here. Um,
Sorry.
No, totally fine. I had neglected to mention this at the top, Mike, not at all your fault. If you do have questions or a little bit of feedback during this panel discussion, please feel free, put it into the chat. Or if you want to write it down and save it for a Q&A, we do have one of our coworkers, David Gunther. He's on standby, helping me out to be able to answer anything. Again, I'm so sorry. I don't mean to be rude, but yeah, initially asking these questions for the panel, but
Okay, go ahead.
would like your feedback. So I apologize. So yeah, Barry, what has MEB adopted?
So we've really leveraged some not new tools, but some different features within those tools. And we've talked a lot about the human error and what a large percentage of breaches are attributed to the human error. And so we really try to focus on that big chunk. And my thinking is, if I can focus on 90% of the problem, then I'll call Eric and the Know Before guys to focus on the things that we maybe can't. And so with that being said, I want to look at, they're not doing it on purpose for the most part. There's some internal threats, but my working assumption is that people do that by mistake a lot of times. And so we've cracked down a little bit. Users, it's not always easy to bear the news that, hey, your password's going to expire every month instead of every 90 days now. And so we have ratcheted down on that. We've ratcheted down on multi and two-factor authentication. So we've done some of those things that truly have, to the end user who are really, really sensitive to it, MEB, it's really important to us what their experience is using our technology. We look at that and we're very sensitive to that. And one of the things that we did to offset that is last year we implemented SSO on two of our most used applications. One is our ERP, which in our industry is called Yardi Systems. And the second is our productivity suite, which is Google in our case. And so we always try to add a positive to something that might be construed as, oh my gosh, you're making my life more difficult.
I wanted to touch on one thing that was kind of brought up as a good segue. We've talked a lot about cyber insurance here, and really more broadly compliance. So the general question is, how does compliance factor into cybersecurity? But what I really want to get at is, are today's compliance requirements good enough for proper cybersecurity? Eric, we haven't heard from you in a while. I'll open that up to you.
I think it's always a work in progress. Refining, what we have as far as cybersecurity to meet all the needs, including what insurance providers are looking for. And one of the things that I keep looking at is probably related to one of the other questions, but keep adding layers of security when things appear good. Avoid complacency and also gradualism with cybersecurity. So I think just as IT professionals, we're always looking at ways to, one is cut down the noise. We get so many alerts. What's actionable? And then what do we feed to our team to actually address and and improve our processes.
Yeah, Stel, your business has some parallels with ours. What we have found is we can sort of shout from the mountaintops, you need to adopt these security best practices. But for some clients, they don't actually pull the trigger. They don't make that decision until an external party tells them to. So their cyber insurance is going to drop them if they don't adopt it, or HIPAA compliance or PCI compliance or whatever. How has your business handled that? Do you have success in getting people to go above and beyond compliance?
Some, but I'll tell you, the dirty secret is compliance is the driver in cybersecurity. Period. I mean, it's so far ahead from security posture as far as a driver that it's almost not worth talking about anything else but compliance when you're going, especially going into new clients. Now that said, that doesn't mean you don't make progress from there, and compliance can be responded to with the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. So there is a lot of wiggle room in there, and we find ourselves getting in with what we could and then working on those clients to get them to understand the value of those controls and slowly grow them, mature them, to a full spirit of the law versus letter of the law in those cases. And we have a bit of success there, but it takes time. But let me give a little nod to those businesses, because I don't want to disparage them too much. It's actually natural that compliance is a driver. Here's why. They're businesses. They're there to make money. And that means that they're going to watch their costs very carefully. And sadly also, there's a lot of money that's spent kind of needlessly, where they're buying a product because they feel that brand name, is the right brand name. They could spend half the money, for instance, or they buy a product and it sits for years in the corner, or they're buying overlapping products or services and whatnot. So, it's way too easy to throw away money. And so businesses have to be careful. I don't blame them for that. On top of that, they're competing with other businesses. So when they spend money, that makes them less competitive. So here's where compliance is then therefore really valuable. It creates an even playing field. If I said to you, hey, you don't have to provide health insurance to your employees, in many industries, you would be at a competitive disadvantage if you were offering that, because now you have a greater cost. Your margins are tighter than your competitor. And what's going to happen? There's going to be a race to the bottom. Now, in the tech industry, we're fortunately not in that case, in that place, because, the tech industry has, a high compensation, et cetera. We compete for resources. But I'm just making a point. This is true in cybersecurity. Companies don't want to spend money, A, because, they're careful about waste, B, because they want to be competitive. So we have to have compliance. We need that external from a positive perspective. We need it from government. We need it from industry. One of the most successful compliance frameworks out there is PCI DSS. That's industry. That's not government. Doesn't have to come from government. So let's come together and apply these and applaud them and welcome them. And my favorite one is the new SEC regulations on disclosure. A lot of people gave me, threw rotten tomatoes at me for that, for me coming out ahead on that. And here's why I love it, because it's not too prescriptive for the business. So it gives them some wiggle room on like how they want to apply it. But let's face it, that changes things for you when you have to disclose in, 4 days, I think it is. That means you got to have data. That means you want to prevent that happening. You're going to increase your protection system. So anyways, that's the kind of regulation I want to see. I think compliance being the driver is a good thing, not a bad thing, even though I started off saying it kind of more like that.
Stel, for my education and the education of our attendees, could you talk a little bit more about what those new SEC regulations are?
Yeah, the core of it is exactly what I said. It's breach disclosure. Okay. So it's like, so you are now required there was a federal government requirement for government contractors that they have a similar, I don't remember what the time period, I think it was shorter, 3 days, breach disclosure. And what's a breach is prescribed, so here's impacting of this degree, and there's some very specific parameters you could define a breach, and then but for the SEC one is to public companies. But public companies will now require it of their vendors, so it spills out everywhere pretty much. And think about this: when you say I need to disclose, you got to know if you had a breach or not. And if you want to know whether you're below that threshold of being able to have a disclosure or not, so you need data. You need to be able to move quickly on forensics. You need to have protection systems that log, so that you're not just looking at something that is a snapshot. I mean, so yeah. So anyway, but that's I should point out the other aspect of it, because that's the meat of it. But their part of the SEC's justification is that shareholders need to know that, because this could be impacting on the future value of the company, even existential for that matter, by the way. But let's not. That's not what it's exciting me. I mean, I think it's a good thing. But what's exciting me is that breach disclosure does directly map to improving security posture.
I think that that segues nicely the conversation that we're having. One of the questions that I had sent you, a common challenge for IT is convincing business leadership to make investments in new technology, right? We're talking about compliance being the driver for actually getting business to move the needle. But how do you have that conversation about increasing cybersecurity budgets for people who are totally removed from this world? And Barry, as a C-suite level person in your organization, I'd really like to know kind of how you have that conversation.
Sure. It can be a very tough conversation. Actually, I'm partnering with Eric on some of that even right now. What I would say though is that it's less tough today than maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I think the word is getting out there. Everyone's got to have cybersecurity insurance, so there's a hard cost there. You start seeing certain incentives and discounts when you have certain levels of security, and in order to get those, it's pretty easy to come up with some hard costs. So it's all about mitigating risks, and most of those in that C-suite are looking at P&Ls. I mean, it's all about profit and loss, right? I mean, that's really what they're doing. And so you can scare them if you want. There's some statistics that you can say, hey, I just read one here recently where for small businesses, the average cost of a cyber attack is $2.5 million. I don't know how many of those you could sustain. And they in this article defined it as small businesses under 500 employees. MEB is right on the tier of that at about 650. But I think the data, and if you can't tell I'm a data guy, I think you have to present data. The P&L is the P&L, and it's based on numbers, it's quantifiable. And so you've got to provide data. So you've got to put it all together. It takes a little bit of homework because these things are all intertwined. An investment in this for IT means that I have a discount on my cybersecurity insurance of this. So maybe it's a wash, or maybe, so you got to play with the numbers. You got to really work with that. And that seems to have worked with me. The other thing I would mention here at MEB is I'm very fortunate to work with some very principal senior level leaders that understand IT pretty darn good. It hasn't always been this way for me, and so I'm a bit spoiled right now, and I appreciate every bit of it.
Yeah, Eric, could you expand on that a little bit? I know you work closely with Barry, but some of our other clients, right? We deal with some of these mid-market businesses who, some of them are more receptive to IT expenditures than others. Yeah, can you speak a little bit to sort of those easy conversations, the tough conversations?
Yeah, it can start off easy and then become a little bit tough when the prices and costs are involved. But yeah, it's something that as an IT provider and securing the network, we're always looking at what the impact, the damage, the cost of the after the fact issue. I know a lot of times business owners are looking at what's the immediate cost, can I budget it, and they also factor in what if. A lot of companies, they want redundancy, they want another internet circuit, they want additional servers, but there's a cost to that. They don't want any downtime, right? But when you factor in the cost, it's like, well, we could be down for a day and we'd be okay. But then when the time comes when there is downtime, they're like, oh, everything's on fire. What do we do? How do we prevent this from happening in the future? Same thing with cybersecurity. How did that person get that email? That phishing link should have never happened, should have never landed in their inbox. So then they start to, invest in the security, and it's a little bit too late because the damage has already been done. I don't know if you guys have the original club, the steering wheel lock. Probably bought it when you heard about it, or maybe probably bought it after your car was broken into. And after a while, it's like you put it on, and then over time, it's kind of a hassle. I'm just not going to put it on this time. I'm going to the mall. And then over time, that thing just sits in the back of your seat, in the trunk, and then eventually just never shows up again. We're trying to prevent that from happening for our clients and partners. And that's what I talked about, kind of gradualism steps in. And if we just keep growing that budget, we won't be as impacted when something, hopefully nothing major happens, but we can have the budget always there to prevent that from happening.
Zach, there's another car metaphor for you.
I know they're coming left and right, but I think Eric hit on something really, really important there, where it's an ongoing conversation, but sometimes the end clients don't realize it until it happens to them, until they see the pain in front of them. And I think one thing Barry said, where it's the business owners need hard data, right? At the end of the day, we can talk about these different tools, what they do, what they prevent, but when you have these conversations, data is really important. And I think that one important thing that kind of gets lost is we always see the number of ransomware attacks or the number of things that have hit end clients, but we don't really talk about the number of ransomware attacks that were stopped and the number of ones that were prevented, and actually look at that whole number and take that whole number and be like, this is how many attempts were made at small, medium business or at any business all over the world. And so if you look at that number, it makes it very real that it is no longer a matter of if it's going to happen, but when it's going to happen. So when you get attacked, do you have the right cybersecurity in place? Do you have the right backup and remediation tools? Do you have the right things so that you don't have that day of downtime? And Eric and I talk quite a bit about this, and they'll say they're okay with a day of downtime, and then we have a tool, and it's just an RTO calculator. Just, okay, let's calculate how much that day of downtime would cost you. And then they see the number and it's over $200,000, $300,000 a day, and they go, okay, well, maybe this isn't the conversation I thought I was having. So kind of coming full circle, I think that all the points that are made are very real, and that kind of taking a step back, it's harping on the fact that all of these attacks, all of these attempts, it is worldwide. And as I mentioned earlier, that as the attack vector is growing, it's only going to get more and more. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Well, we're getting close to the end of our question time, but I do want to ask one more question to all of you. If you're talking to a business IT professional and they say, okay, I know I need my environment to become more secure, but I don't know where to start. What is the one thing that what's the first step? And James, I want to start with you. It's been a little bit since we've heard from you.
Initially, it's going to be, what's your budget? What kind of time frame are we talking about? You get into the project management aspects of it. For me, a lot of the times when people say, all right, I have a short amount of time, like recently when we had the shields up from CISA, and I had organizations that were pinging us going, okay, we got to get our security awareness program. What do we got to do first? What's the most important thing? Outside of, getting your systems patched, certainly looking at the human element, make sure you've got, you fortify that element, that human firewall, and get them all shored up. Keep them vigilant, checking their email. Am I expecting it? Is they asking me to do anything unusual? Do I know the person? Just going through some basic questions can kind of help fortify that up. But a lot of the time, it just may come down to, what kind of time frame we're talking, how much money we got, and then go from there. But for me, and what I'm always talking about is, securing the human.
And I'm just going to go in camera order. Eric, same question to you. What's the first step?
I'm sorry, what's the entire question? I was still enthralled with James' response.
Yeah, no. Essentially, the question is, what should a business IT professional do? What's the next step they should take to improve the security in their environment?
Oh, it's one of those things that if to find out what you have, because if you don't know what you have, you don't know how to secure it. Documentation, we're really big on that as a company, is tracking all your IT assets to make sure that everything is known and what to protect. A lot of times that kind of escapes us as IT professionals, or not, but just the IT world in general. Things aren't documented. But once we get that discovered, and then we can put in the necessary layers of security as needed.
And Barry?
Yeah, I like what Eric said. I mean, you got to know what you have before you can really move forward. So that's a good one. And similar to what I was going to say in terms of, I think you got to start with a strategy. I mean, it's just too big. It's hard to say that any one thing is going to be the right way to start. It needs to be looked at holistically. I think you need to have a strategy in terms of just some real practical. I would say, particularly for small businesses, is really focus on the cloud services. There's no way that we can create the on-prem security that we need to really secure our businesses. And so I'm a real advocate of the cloud services, especially for the small and mid-sized companies. And then last to that is if you believe that 90 to 95% of the problem is human caused, focus there. It's not very expensive. It maybe is a little bit, you have to get a little bit more creative. You got to put some more thought into it, but create those policies and really try to develop your end users into greater awareness.
And we'll wrap it up, Zach, and then Stell, take us home.
I'm going to say two things. The first, because I look at it as if I was to start my own business today, what would be my first thing I would do? And the first thing I would do is I would call Eric, because he is the expert, and I would call Eric and I would say, and seriously though, it's work with the experts, work with an MSP, work with an MSSP that you trust and that you develop a relationship with, because there's no need to reinvent the wheel, right? You don't need to go out and Google search, what do I need for cybersecurity? There are resources out there. And so that's the first thing that I would do is work with your IT provider. And if you don't have one, reach out and to other colleagues or friends that might have one. So that's the first thing. And then getting more specific is what aspect of the business would I focus on first? And I would focus on your cloud applications, because working with, just for example, Office 365, there's so much that is done within Office 365. So working to secure that, and that making sure you can have that base level and help grow your business without worrying about that, I think is the most important thing to start with.
I'll build on top of Eric's point about assets. To me, it's just kind of not just the lowest hanging fruit as far as like kind of high value bang for your buck, but you'd be surprised how many like pretty big enterprise clients, you go in and you get documentation and you're designing whatever for them, and until you do some scans, you don't see everything on that network. In fact, I might even say the big organizations and are worse there, but even small organizations, they're surprised what they have, versions, et cetera. So, this is why it's not good enough to tell them keep a database. It's not good enough to say do some scans periodically. I mean, this is why we built continuous vulnerability management, an ongoing scan. You can trend over time. You asset discovery. New things pop on the network, whether it's shadow IT or just like weak change management, you're catching that up on those, on those scans. So you're tracking assets, software, Active Directory users, orphaned accounts, on a regular basis. Super cheap for the value you get for it. I'll throw that number one. Call it asset management, but vulnerability management, on top of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we have just a couple minutes left, so I'd like to open it up to our audience if they have any questions for the panel. Probably only time for one or two, but please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask a question if you have one. And okay if there's none too.
I was trying to give Michael a chance to ask his question. This is Mitch Hamilton. I was going to point my question to James when you kind of pointed to that FBI report that talked about the discrepancy, almost 100 times difference there. Obviously, we uncovered some through the discussion that the missing vulnerability scan or ransomware attacks that actually happened that were caught, that might add to some of that disparity. But what's your thought or biggest, how can we educate the public, you being an instructor at the collegiate level, what's the biggest way to educate companies to focus more on the email than the ransomware?
You bring up a good point, and we can put out education program after education program and get the people to take it. It's a matter of them taking it seriously, taking it and keeping security top of mind. It's a culture shift is what we're talking about. And in the 12 plus years that I've been doing security awareness, we can bring them to the water, but if they're not going to drink it, just because they don't like the taste of it or they don't care about it, there's a lot more to it to drive that culture. And I, working for 18 years at a little German company called Siemens, I visited a lot of power plants and a lot of wind farms, and everywhere I went, health and safety was a huge part of that culture, where I'd have to go to the plant, take a quiz, get my little sticker, and then I was meeting the requirements. But that's kind of where we are with security awareness, is getting it into the organizations, getting it into the schools, getting it more aware for people, and making sure that they care, they understand the why, and kind of take that next step. And with regards to those phishing emails and trying to keep an eye out for those different attacks. But there's going to be technology that's going to need to support them as well, because it's never 100%. You still may get somebody that clicks on a link, so you still need to be able to have the monitoring systems and the different equipment technology that's going to be able to reduce that risk of the attack getting any further.
Thanks, appreciate that.
Yeah, great question, Mitch. Anybody else? Michael, I hope you accept my sincere apologies for cutting you off earlier. If you have any questions or did want to share anything with the group.
Yeah, I just want to know, what are you guys' thoughts on Duo, Cisco Duo?
Yeah, Eric, I know we use it. Why don't you take that one?
Oh yeah, a very versatile product. Definitely a big difference between like the free MFA products that's more like one app specific versus the Duo platform, which is more versatile. You can have one product do many, protection for many different applications and services. We love it. I think they, from what I know, as far as I know, they were the first ones who did the push notification features. Everyone else was doing the passcode. Manual passcode, but they've kind of pioneered that, and we use them for RDS servers, VPN, O365, you name it, and it's very compatible.
Okay, we're testing it out now. Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Good question.
Yeah, as a user of Duo in our own Shannock environment, it's one of the easier MFA apps in terms of, I I have a couple other MFA apps for other specific applications, but it's nice to have Duo be the one that has most things that live under it. But my experience is fairly limited. Okay. Are there any other questions? I think we're going to wrap it up unless there's anything else quick from the group.